I call this meeting of the Midcoast Community Council of September 26, 2018 to order. Will the council members please introduce themselves from my left?
Dan Haggerty.
Chris Johnson.
Brandon Kwan.
Dave Olson.
Lisa Ketchum. Barbara Mathewson.
And council member Toutant will not be able to be here tonight. Okay, first order of business is supervisor's report. I do not see Ellie or anybody else from the supervisor's office, so we'll let that go. Harvey, did you want to speak?
Well, here she is.
Oh. Ellie, are you ready to run in and talk?
Could we hold it for 1 second? I have an issue.
Sure, we'll hold.
Thank you.
So we're on recess now?
We're on pause.
Okay.
All right, we're ready to roll? All right, Ellie Dahlman, would you like to speak?
Alrighty. Good evening, Midcoast Community Council and Midcoast community members. My name is Ellie Dahlman, and I'm here on behalf of San Mateo County Supervisor Don Horsley to provide a few updates for you. So the first thing I'll mention is just a handout that I passed around, and I have, I think, 3 more copies I'll leave on the table out front. But Supervisor Horsley asked me to pass on this Home for All glossary of terms that defines affordable housing, area median income, and the current income category levels for various family sizes. So it goes through and defines various terms related to housing, just kind of informational purposes for you. And then the second item I have is just an announcement about an upcoming event that the County Office of Sustainability is putting on called the Fix It Clinic, which they're doing in partnership with Hassett Hardware at the Half Moon Bay Public Library. So essentially anything that you have that might be broken that you can carry, you can bring to this Fix It Clinic. There will be a number of coaches, volunteers, if you're interested in volunteering there, to help you attempt to fix your item, so as a kind of way to recycle or reuse items. And I'll leave those flyers on the front table. And one other thing I wanted to announce is you may have seen in the Half Moon Bay Review or a San Mateo Daily Journal last week, Supervisor Horsley along with Post and Blue House Farms gathered to celebrate the completion of 4 new low-income farm labor housing units installed in the San Gregorio location for San Mateo County farm workers. And as you all know, farms are a key thread in the fabric of the coastside community, and Supervisor Horsley is really grateful for the partnership with Post and farmers such as Blue House to help keep agriculture viable on the coast by providing the needed housing for the workers. And that project was made in part due to Measure K funds, which was the half-cent sales tax approved by the voters. And let's see, I have one more informational update to provide to you from the county regarding a summary of proposed changes to the cultivation ordinance. And I'll try to go through these quickly, and I'll leave this copy here with you so you can put it up on the website. But so the first category discusses an updates to the setback requirements. The first states elimination of 100-foot setback between structures associated with cultivation and the property line. The second states that the 300-foot setback between structures associated with cultivation and business or residential structures on surrounding properties remains. However, new language clarifies that the setback applies only to existing residential or business structures. And there's some additional definitions there. I won't read through everything, but and then the 1,000-foot setback between the property where cultivation is occurring and state-defined sensitive areas such as schools, daycare centers, youth centers, playgrounds, alcohol and drug treatment facilities is reduced to 600 feet in accordance with state law. And the 600-foot setback remains measured from property line to property line as required by the state law. And nurseries remain subject to this setback requirement as required by state law. And the 1,000-foot setback between the property where cultivation is occurring and residentially zoned properties, which are not included in the state definition of sensitive areas, is also reduced to 600 feet. And the 600-foot setback is measured from the structure associated with cultivation to the property line of the nearest residentially designated property. And nurseries are exempt from this residential setback requirement. And then the next section covers agricultural production protection. And it's, the language is clarified to prohibit only the displacement of edible agricultural crops, not all crops. And the second item states, to achieve the goal of agricultural preservation throughout the county, the language is also clarified to allow the relocation of edible crops to another facility within the county, not just to another area of the property where cultivation is occurring. And the next section states sunset eliminated, meaning all currently prohibited commercial cannabis activities will remain prohibited after December 31st, 2018. And just two more areas. The second to last states canopy area. In accordance with state law, the definition of canopy area, the area where cultivation is occurring, is revised to include only mature plants and exclude immature plants used solely to replenish mature cultivation stock. And finally, security requirements states, consistent with the discretionary approval process, the community development director may waive or modify surveillance and security requirements on a case-by-case basis if adequate alternative measures are proposed. And then the last line just states some technical changes to application language, record retention, and ADA compliance was made. So if you have any questions about those proposed changes, I'd be happy to take them and report back to you with responses from county staff. And you can also send them to me via email.
Did you say you were going to give us a copy of that?
Yes, I will leave
Okay.
this with you.
Does anybody on the council have a question on that? Dan?
Yeah, thank you, Ellie. You started out by just saying cultivation, which is kind of a vague term. Are you talking about cannabis cultivation?
Yes.
Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more, because it sounded like you talked about edibles. It got kind of mixed.
Yes, this is
So what-
related
what are
to
we-
the cultivation ordinance for cannabis cultivation. And
Okay.
I apologize for leaving that word out.
But you did mention edible cultivation. Are you talking about?
Non-cannabis edible crops, like
To displacement
artichokes,
of-
Brussels
right.
sprouts, et cetera.
The language is clarified to prohibit only the displacement of edible agricultural crops, not all crops. So it's not referring to edible
Right.
cannabis related. It would be referring to any agricultural crops that are edible.
And all of those
So-
terms are defined in the existing ordinance. These are just modifications.
Maybe it's just me. About displacing edible, let's just say rocky.
Can I?
Yes,
give a-
go ahead, sure.
So we got flowers and houseplants growing in the greenhouses. If they get rid of that, they can put the cannabis. But if they're growing food in the greenhouses, they can't displace that. That's what it's saying.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's
Thank
my
you.
understanding.
Okay. Helps.
Thank you.
very much, Lisa.
Any other council questions on that? Anything else, Ellie?
The only thing I'll add, I know there's a request from the council for additional information about Seton Hospital and that process. Other than the resolution that was approved by the board, I don't have any new information for you. What I can say from Supervisor Horsley is that the county is not interested in purchasing the hospital or running the hospital, but other than ongoing monitoring of the situation, I have no new information to share.
When you say hospital, you mean the big one or Seton Coast side?
Seton Hospital, I believe the big one on the,
All right, because I have this memory of the last time the thing was sold that Supervisor Horsley said something that, you know, I got the impression that the county might consider buying Seton Coast side to preserve it, but that they didn't want to tackle buying the big one. So I
Okay.
just wondered if maybe that's why, hoping that maybe that's why Seton Coast side was not included in this thing they just approved, resolution.
I can ask the supervisor and come back with clarification.
Okay.
All right. There was one other thing I saw in the agenda in the summary which was they approved the no parking zone on Airport Boulevard. Did I get that correct?
Yes.
Okay, that was the one that the council requested. All right, any other questions for Ellie from the council? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Harvey?
Harvey Rohrback, the Vice Mayor of Half Moon Bay. I have a couple of quick meeting announcements that may be relevant to people here. It's election season, and there are a couple of forums that are involving the city council race, and I'm sure some of you, at least one person here is a Half Moon Bay resident. So the Half Moon Bay City Council is going to have a forum tomorrow night, sponsored by the League of Women Voters. That's going to be at the library at 7 o'clock. And then on October 21st, there will be a real debate where the city council candidates going to ask each other questions. There'll be a real opportunity to learn about the candidates. That's also going to be at the library. It's also going to be at 7 o'clock, October 21st. And finally, October 30th, we're going to have a event at the Ted Adcock Center where we're going to celebrate voting by coming to bring your ballot with you. We're going to have free food. It'll be a family event. It'll be an opportunity to talk about the election. So that's October 30th. That's at the Ted Adcock Center. The other item I have on my list here is having to do with airline noise, which I know is of consequence to lots of people on the coast side. October 3rd, the SFO Roundtable is going to be discussing airport noise once again. But more significantly, October 23rd, Jackie Spear is organizing an event to talk about the FAA's response to how we can try to ameliorate the airport noise, airline noise on the coast side. And that might be a real opportunity to make a real impact, because the FAA is really calling all the shots, and Jackie Spear is working on trying to get them to do the right thing. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
The event with Jackie Spear, is that on the coast side, or is that?
It's at Skyline College.
Sort of on the coast side.
Date again was?
October 23rd. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Brandon?
So Harvey, just a little question. So the 2020 council election, that will be the first by district election?
Correct.
And would the at-large mayoral election be up then, or in 2022?
No, the mayoral election will be in 2022.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you. Chris from the CHP?
Good evening, everybody. Just again, that we are increasing some patrols and enforcement up here. Very specifically, I wanted to mention, we had a complaint come in about Sunshine Valley Road and about speeding. So the speed limit there is 25 miles per hour. However, there is no engineering traffic survey for that area. What that does for us is we can't enforce speed with radar. And currently we had an officer respond there to conduct traffic enforcement. Average speed was about 40 miles an hour. The only problem with this engineering traffic survey is if you go that route, if you request that from the county to come out and do a traffic survey, if they find out to be the 85th percentile to be, let's just say 35 or 38, then obviously the speed limit 25 miles per hour is going to increase. So just keep that in mind. We'll continue to conduct traffic enforcement in the area. There's other violations out there, cell phones, stop signs, so we'll continue to have a visual presence of that to slow people down as well. questions about that.
Well, thank you, and some of your coworkers worked to get the county to get that striped, and that seemed to bring the speed limit down.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, not the speed limit, the speeding down for a while, but apparently people have gotten used to it.
Okay. And
We
again,
will talk about that perhaps at some future meeting. It's a real concern if the speed limit ends up getting raised.
yes, and we're monitoring the area. And again, people going over 40 miles an hour in a residential area, it's pretty frightening, I would say. We don't want to wait for something to happen, but we're going to continue being out there, whether visual presence or other violations. Again, people will see us and we'll slow down naturally, hopefully. So, other than that, if there's any other complaints, just forward them again to Jason Ivy, my supervisor, and we'll handle it from there. Anything else?
Great. Nothing from me. Anybody else on the council?
I just want to
Dan?
add, it's not just Sunshine Valley Road.
Right, no, that was just the
There's
most.
all over, there's those occasional,
Right. That was the most recent complaint, so I just wanted to address that. There's obviously other areas of concern, and we're conducting traffic enforcement in those areas as well, obviously other than Highway 1.
Right,
do you-
espe-
I would be interested, do you have any, you said most recent, any, in the past couple months, other areas that people are complaining?
I don't have those statistics. All
Okay.
thing regarding Sunshine Valley was within the week, so we already quickly sent an officer to that area to conduct enforcement. I don't have the figures as far as the other complaints. I'll bring that actually to the next meeting to have more stats for you guys.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
You have those radar units there that measure people's speed and flashes, and whoever installed one of those is clearly not very bright because it's never worked, because it doesn't get enough sunlight for it to actually work.
Okay.
And it's been like that for years, so maybe you know somebody that can fix that, because I think a visual indicator might remind some people.
Did it have a CHP badge on there, or was it like a sheriff? Do you know, do you recall?
No, it's what the county put up, I think, I don't know.
At
Okay.
what intersection?
It's not an intersection, it's on Sunshine Valley. As you're going from Etheldor towards Sunshine Valley, it's the one on the right-hand side, right in all the eucalyptus trees.
Okay.
Is
So it's just that
is
it's
this
not
an
activated?
emplaced sign or something on a trailer?
It's a placed sign.
Okay, that would be county
It
public works.
flashes up the speed of the cars, but that sign never worked because the solar panel is placed so dumb that it never gets sunlight, and the battery doesn't charge, and so it doesn't display it, ever.
I can follow up with Public Works to see, I think it could also potentially be fog, and I'm not sure if there is sufficient sunlight,
Even
but
on
I'll
sunny
follow up
days.
with them.
That thing has never worked.
All right, well, thank you for letting us know. LA will follow up on that. I do want to bring one thing up, and I don't want to start any big debates, but as I'm sure you're aware, there were 2 DUI accidents at Medio Creek recently, one of them fairly severe. And we may try and enlist your help in the future in getting something done there.
Okay.
We heard from the community that there have been a very large number of mostly minor accidents there that haven't been reported, so they may not be reflected in the accident statistics, so. I would encourage anybody watching this, or anybody you tell, if somebody's in an accident at an intersection, make sure a police report gets filed. It makes it a lot easier to get something done.
I want to add on to that. A few weeks ago, I'm not sure what date, but I remembered driving northbound. There was just a flip-over car by Devil's Slide Tunnel, and it caused a very bad backup. I'm not sure when exactly it was, but there was a car that flipped over, so there are a lot of cars that just turn very quickly, and then they just, their wheels get off traction, and they just flip, and then when I passed over, an ambulance, are parked right there, and so there's, so I mean, this has been happening over and over again. People turning very quickly in Devil's Slide and flipping and causing a lot of traffic.
Okay.
In that sense.
You're talking about the one that was about 4 or 5 months ago, maybe 6 months?
Well, a few weeks. No. It was It's in Montera, it's just south the tunnel in Montera.
Past month?
Yeah,
Yeah, there's
yeah,
been
past
some more
month.
recent ones.
Yeah.
Just the speed is a big problem there.
Yeah.
Through the curve, okay,
Mhm.
okay.
Thank you.
And so regards to the DUI, the two recent ones,
Mhm.
okay. We're definitely have our hands full with DUI, especially with the passing of the marijuana law earlier this year. Statistics are significantly increased.
Okay.
DUI accidents, I mean, it's all going up, and as we suspected. But we are doing enforcement, we have extra patrols, there's grant DUI out there as well. So, we are doing the enforcement, but definitely we would like to have a discussion about that as well.
Great.
And bring all those concerns to us, we'll very much appreciate it. Any other questions?
Doesn't look like it, so
Okay,
thank you
great.
very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Steve, did you want to speak?
Thank you, council members. I'm Steve McGraw, the General Manager for the San Mateo County Harbor District. A couple of things to bring you up to speed on. The sidewalk project down at the harbor is proceeding apace. The contractor's doing a terrific job. Run into all of the surface, the stuff that happened on the surface went very smoothly, but we were replacing also a couple of sections of storm drain pipe. And as anybody who's done any construction knows, as soon as you dig below the surface, things can slow down. And sure enough, we found a lot of utilities where we weren't expecting them, and that slowed things down a little bit there. But contractor's doing a great job. Surface beach, the board, the commission did award contracts for both the sediment sampling and analysis and the design and engineering of the project. So we'll get going on that. I've got to, again, give a shout out to our consultant on that, Brad Damitz, who has done an admirable job of navigating all of the jurisdictional and regulatory issues that we faced getting this to that project, to this point. The board, Harvey was mentioning the district elections in the city of Half Moon Bay. We've been through the same process. We did adopt at the beginning of this month new maps for the Harbor District elections that will be in effect for the 2020 election for the first time. I've got several copies of that map here, and it's also available on our website. So, match that. One of the things that the district is looking at, and there'll be some conversation about this that might be of interest to the community at large, is without any recommendation at this point from staff, we are looking at the piece of property to the immediate east of Sam's Chowder House for potential for development of a new district administrative building and community meeting room. Again, we're not at the point, we're in due diligence, we're not at the point of staff being prepared to make any sort of recommendation to the board, but that is something that we're looking at, and you'll be hearing more about that as we go along.
Steve, directly east, across Highway 1 or on the same side?
On the same side, and so it actually slopes down to the coastal trail right by and a little, I said east, I meant west of Sam's.
All right.
Sorry about that. There is a parcel to the east of Sam's that is also for sale. I'm sorry, and a parcel to the west of Sam's, and it looks down pretty much right at the boat launch area. And then other than that, you may have seen in the newspaper that I have submitted my resignation to the board. I will be leaving at the beginning of December. I will be here, present and accounted for right up until the end. No long vacations to run out my time. So I'll be back in front of this council at some point again before my departure. But I do want to say that I have so thoroughly enjoyed a challenging and rewarding time at the Harbor District, and I stand ready to help the district, the incoming general manager, whoever that might be, in any way that I can. And it's with regret, but a feeling of sort of amount of satisfaction that I believe. So, yeah. Here we are.
We thank you for everything you've done in your time here. You've made great progress.
Thank you.
I want to first thank you for your service and thank you for coming all the way here to Coast and becoming a general manager, at least for a few years. So I want to ask, how's the process started for looking for a new general manager? And is there going to be an interim general manager? Or
Those are all decisions that the board is looking at. I only tendered my resignation on the 11th of September, and the board has already started discussions in closed session about what they want to do from here on out.
I understand. Thank you.
Any other questions, Dan?
Yeah, again, echoing Brian, thank you for your service, Steve,
Thank you.
while you're still on the clock.
Yes.
Question about the sidewalk expansion. So as far as, has there been a determined width of pathway through between, I expect there's gonna be a lot more tables out there, it's gonna be used, the
Yes.
expansion's gonna be used.
Yes.
How are we looking at the width and the enforcement of keeping that area clear? You know, I'm all, you know, pretty much for this open dining thing, but, you know, a lot of, I see it all the time where people are just sitting and blocking the sidewalk, you can't get through. Pedestrians have to stop and wait, or single file, or whatever,
So there's, at very least, there is a minimum ADA requirement for a pathway, and we will be maintaining that. We will be talking with the tenants about actually, as a part of this project, before it wraps up, defining precisely
so it's in the
what
process.
what it is that they will be entitled to expand out onto. Before it had been sort of organic, I think. Now we will look at actual definitions and identifying that point on the sidewalk up to which they can expand.
So identifying that is
Yeah.
still kind of in the process.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And in regards to the concept of harbor offices, just say west of Sam's,
Mhm.
next to Sam's, what comes to mind is the image of the half moon bay, quarter moon bay, you know, 1/8 moon bay, and, you know, blocking the view.
Right.
So,
Understood.
I will just, at this moment, say I have big concerns with that location for
Under-
district law.
Understood. When we presented this to the commission, the first time, the seller had in fact engaged an architect to look, and that particular site actually was graded down towards the trail at one point, many, many years ago. So when we say what we're anticipating is, if it goes forward, a single-story building, sort of at or just below existing grade, because we remember the grade on there is about 5 feet above the roadway. And then at the southern side, or the harbor side, below that would be could be a community meeting room and a boardroom for the harbor commission. The entire site, I have checked with county planning, it's outside of the tsunami inundation zone. And there's a lot of figuring out to be done, but certainly viewshed impacts was front and center for me when I was thinking about this, and thinking about even bringing it to the commission for consideration. And given the existing elevation above roadway, I think we can pretty well minimize, there will be an impact, but we will be very conscious of viewshed impacts as we go into this. The proposition that went to the commission when we first talked about it, and they authorized me to enter into an exclusive negotiating agreement with the seller, even talked about things like a green roof on the building, so that the view impacts from higher up on that hill on the other side of the highway could be minimized as well. We'd be looking at a LEED certified building. Again, we're, I think, possibly getting ahead of ourselves. View shed is important, traffic is important, parking is important, all of these things, and if the board decides to move forward with this, those are certainly things we'll be looking at.
And also, do you have any knowledge of any alternative locations for
So,
proposals?
Tina,
This
I'm gonna
is turning-
suggest that be taken up at a Harbor District meeting rather than here. The Steve's made a report, all of this has been at the Harbor District meeting, so. It's a good question, but I would suggest it be done at the Harbor District meeting. Thank you very much, Steve. All right, I have a couple of announcements. The next meeting of the MCC, October 10th, will not be held. There will be a candidate forum in this room instead, sponsored by the MCC and the League of Women Voters of North and Central San Mateo County. First part will be at 7 p.m. That will be the San Mateo County Harbor District Board of Commissioners, and following that at 8:15 will be the Cabrillo Unified School District. The week after that, on a Tuesday, October 16th, we will have a candidates forum for the Granada Community Services District, who normally meets in this room and graciously lets us use it. And at 8:15, the Montero Water and Sanitary District Board of Directors. So those are both coming up. Those are good chances to meet the candidates. I've been working on the Ohlone Portola Heritage Trail 250th anniversary for quite a while with county parks and pretty much every other organization you can think of that might possibly be interested. They had their first public meeting last night in Pacifica. It went pretty well from what I heard. I was a little bit under the weather, so I didn't go. There will be another one October 1st, a Monday, down in Pescadero at the Pescadero Native Sons Community Hall. And on Tuesday, October 2nd, at the Woodside Town Hall. So if you're at all interested in trails or history, you might want to plan on attending one of those. There will be some links on the MCC site. They have also put together a public survey. I just got the information on that earlier today. We'll put a link to that on the MCC website as well. Any other council members have announcements of interest? All right, well, that was a long session. I will close the Government and Board of Supervisors report. We will move on to public comment. Does anybody wish to speak at public comment on matters not on the agenda? Yes.
I gave you a slip.
Okay.
Okay, I'm Greg Diegas from Montero. Anybody else notice they've cut down a lot of brush and trees in Rancho Corral? It got me thinking, maybe they did it for fire control, which got me thinking, how are we doing on fire? You saw the Mercury News article? We're all living in a tinderbox. So I took a look at the master plan for Montero Water and Sanitary District. And here's a quote. The system-wide flow simulation shows that 39% of the nodes in the distribution system were unable to provide adequate fire flow. Now, of course, they know this. They're planning to do something about it. I'm not sure when. But they never addressed how much water they were storing in order to fight the fires. And, you know, maybe I'll find it. I know Clemens. I'll talk to him. This is, of course, before, this is a 2017 report, before any increase in housing or population that has been discussed here. The capacity in Table 8 of that plan shows a fire that can be handled as a 2-hour designer fire. That fire takes a full day's worth of water capacity and half of the maximum flow for the entire town. But what if it's bigger? What if it's half a dozen houses next to the eucalyptus groves? Do we have enough water for it? There is no place in that plan I can find. There's a fire water reserve. And in addition, the projections that show the capacity and the growth in population don't show a growing fire water reserve for more population and more housing. So That bothers me. I intend to do more research on the topic. I've written Ian Larkin, who's the chief of the fire district. I'll see what I learn. I'll be glad to share what I learn with you. But I have two requests to the MCC. The first is, if there is an assessment of our fire preparedness, please point me to it, so I can look at it, so that some other people in the community and I can audit it and see whether
There
or not it makes
is
sense.
a county emergency plan on the, and I forget exactly where it is on the county site. We do have a link to it on the MCC site.
Have you talked to the fire department
I
about
wrote
this?
Ian Larkin. He's the
And
chief.
And have you talked to Montero Water and Sanitary?
I'm going to talk to Clemens, but before I did that, I wanted to gather the rest of the facts. I wanted to hear what the county said. I also want to hear what the fire department says a typical scenario for a fire would be. A 2-hour designer fire, whatever that means, that's not what we need to be prepared for. Okay, and so finally, if you're unaware, after I look at the link somebody can point me to, or if I can find it, you know, I would love to see this on the agenda, because it'd sure be a shame if, you know, our little growing community here burns to the ground because we undermine our water security and we're not adequately planning storage and capacity. 39%. Just thought you ought to know.
The fire district meets actually the same night we do, so there is a conflict, but I just sense you'd get more information there
I'll
than, because we don't have any. I know that when we get referrals for new projects, the fire department will comment on those referrals, and they will specify required flow and all that. But that's their purview.
So
You know.
the linkage between what they specify and what actually is happening is missing.
So then what's actually the water department, you know, our local control, the water system that we own, and our locally elected board is in charge of that.
Okay, but what happens in Montero isn't gonna stay in Montero. If there's a fire there, it's gonna spread from Lost Beach to El Granada, potentially to Half Moon Bay. So I think everybody has an interest in assessing their own water board. I'm gonna live in Montero.
Okay. All right, does anybody else wish to speak in public comment? Yes.
Hi, I just wanted to get up and introduce myself. My name is Michelle Weil, and I am going to be running for one of the open seats on the Midcoast Community Council. A little bit about my background. I've lived here, relatively new to the coast. I've been here for almost 2 years. Moved here from the city. I've lived in Northern California my whole life. We have family here on the coast, both in El Granada and Montero, and that's why we moved here. I live with my husband, Seth, and my 2-year-old daughter, Kalia. And I work in, over the hill in Palo Alto. My role is marketing and the head of marketing for a small startup in the consumer tech industry. And there's no one running against me, so I guess it's a foregone conclusion that I will have a seat on the council. But yeah, I just want, this is, you know, I haven't been involved in the past, but I'm really, really looking forward to getting involved. And I think there are so many important issues facing us here on the coast, and so I look forward to serving on the council and hopefully representing the community.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And I will say for both Michelle, I think she knows, and anybody else who hadn't heard, I believe I mentioned it at the last meeting, because there were only 4 people who filed for 4 seats, all of us are in automatically, and we will not be on the ballot. They do that in a number of elections when there's no actual race. So you're in. All right, any other public comment? All right, I will close public comment, move on to the consent agenda. The only item on the agenda is the minutes for August 22nd, most of which was spent on the Cypress Point Development Project and our comments on that. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of the August 22nd meeting.
Do I hear a second?
I second it.
All in favor?
I
Carries 6-0. Thank you very much. And we are now on to our regular agenda. The first item on the agenda is a supplemental comment, or set of comments, to
Excuse me.
the Mid-Penn housing submittal to the LCP amendment for Cypress Point. I will say we got quite a bit in our last letter. There were some points brought up in that meeting that we were not able to get into the letter, and a few other things have come up since then, so we're not going to go over everything that we put in the first letter, but we'll go over the stuff we are adding. Lisa, take it away.
Thanks. So we had a presentation at the August 22nd meeting, so I won't do another presentation tonight. There's no new information in these additional comments. It's one page. Basically, we added under hazardous materials 2 comments that more analysis on lead impact of surface soils and for asbestos, both in the remnants, the building materials there, and also checking for elevated levels of asbestos fibers. And then the other section in the letter is about traffic impacts, and basically it says it does not serve the community or the project to attempt to determine key circulation elements for Moss Beach absent an approved long-range comprehensive transportation management plan. This is referred to commonly as Connect the Coastside, which is the project to create this comprehensive transportation management plan, a long-term plan. And then the 3 bullets under that are examples of how this is dysfunctional. Basically, what I had not done for a previous letter, and I should have, was to go back and read where we left off with Connect the Coastside, which is in March 2016. There was a draft, which we commented on extensively, but we've heard nothing since. And there was discussion in that draft to change the definition of intersection level of service. So that's kind of up in the air, and yet this project applicant is expected to comply with what standards they don't know, so that it makes it hard for them to propose something and hard for us to comment. And then also the intersection, the 5-way intersection at California and Wenke, some of the mitigations proposed. Well, it's just what's to happen with Wenke. Basically, the circulation of Moss Beach. How does the community want that to look when at build out, which they're just looking now at 25 years, say 2040, basically, because in 2016, the draft from Connect the Coastside said, well, California meets the signal warrant, but it's too complicated to do a roundabout there because of the 5-way intersection. So it's better to do a traffic signal. But then they say, well, but if we do a traffic signal, you have to reroute Wenke Way because it's too complicated. So that that's laid out in our comments here. So basically, that's the proposed follow-up comments. And I just have a couple of updates for you. I just found out today that the project planner for Connect the Coastside no longer works at county planning. And so we had, over the last 2.5 years, this has been pushed off, and we had thought there would be, we would see this draft final plan next month. Now it looks like maybe not till January. I'll know more tomorrow, but basically, the one good thing I thought when we learned that because of the comments that have been made so far on the project, they need to resubmit some material, particularly traffic information, and so there would be a delay. And I thought, well, great, maybe we can see the Connect the Coastside, see this draft plan, and get to talk about that first. But now that's not clear that's going to happen either. So, but it doesn't change what I proposed for this. And I just want one thing also I wanted to reiterate, because it's come up a lot in past comments. The definition of density, it's a defined land use term, and I know some people may subjectively use that word loosely, but as far as county land use, it's a defined term, and they're proposing to reduce the density allowed on this parcel, and it will then be the same medium density as all the single-family residential neighborhoods in the Midcoast. It will be the same. And so if you say that this is too dense, basically what you're saying, what the county hears is that you're saying all our neighborhoods are too dense. And so I guess my point here is a lot of the comments that I hear related to this project, as we pointed out in our letter last month, are long-standing issues that need to be addressed, that we had hoped perhaps we would see some progress in the Connected Coast side, you know, a chance for us to talk about what we want, or if the certain street's inadequate or is dangerous, what do we want to do to fix that? And that ideally that this long-term plan for circulation in Moss Beach would be a community-involved effort and would not be driven by a particular project. So that's all. Does anybody have any questions? I didn't read the whole letter, but.
Yeah. Any clarifying questions on the council? We'll discuss it after we call for comment from the public. Anybody? Yeah, Barb?
I'm just wondering, on the letter, you make mention of the remnants of the 1940 era's building. In none of our letter do we ever mention this is a former Navy site. Is that been left off? Or?
Well, if we could go through and do a description of the whole project, kind of reiterate
No, I
what
just
they submitted.
making mention of that. It's 1940.
Oh, I just assumed everybody knew that, and
Yeah.
certain
Well,
counties were doing
They actually do describe that in their application, so I think
Okay,
that's pretty well
thank you.
covered. Chris?
Follow-up question on that, because, yeah, I mean, that's, I was, in looking at the minutes from the last meeting, or the meeting where we discussed this, JQ and some others, you know, brought up a good point of it being a former military site where they usually do a lot more environmental review. Do you think that Mike Schaller, without us explicitly stating it, sure, it's in the document, do you think that in his mind or consciously those two pieces are going to be put together, that it's not just we're asking for additional review of a previously used site, but a previously used military site for which it's not entirely clear what was there? Do you think that we can rely on Mike to put those two pieces together?
So they hired a consultant to do this hazard analysis, and they did 32 borings over the whole parcel. It's quite a bit of material to go. I don't expect that everybody went through all that whole submittal. And I did go through it more thoroughly the second time after people brought up those issues, and these were the two things that called out to me that clearly should be followed up on. And I went over there with JQ, and he pointed out the remnants of the building, you know, like tiles and things, because I thought, what could be left there after 50 years? But so these are things that don't rot, and so basically, yeah, they should assess that, and they should also assess the surface soils for the fibers themselves, which they don't, you know, if there were a fire and they settled, they don't degrade and they don't settle down into the soil, they just stay there.
Right.
They don't go down into the water table, they're just there. And so they should, and the problem with the asbestos fibers is that there is no standard for how much is too much, like with lead or these other things. They'll say if you have past a certain level, then you gotta fix that. But they don't have that for asbestos. So but the industry does have standards for, like, they can say whether it's, you know, because you find asbestos fibers just anywhere. But they can say whether it's elevated or extremely elevated. It would be good to know that. So that's all we're just asking for. I didn't see the study that's there that the planner will have to read, and they'll have to do their analysis of it in his staff report. It's there. That's his job, to read that and report on it to the Planning Commission. And it talks about the potential for maybe on the parade grounds, maybe there were some munitions involved, things like that. They talk about all those things, and the incinerator and what you might find there in that area and all that. It's pretty well described.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think there's much doubt that the county planner that there's no way he can miss the fact that it was a military base. It's covered in numerous places.
Okay. All right, thank you.
The other thing that I have to ask the community is, that, okay, say there are contaminants here, asbestos or whatever it is. If this project does not get built for one reason or another, what does the community want to have done with that? Given that children play there, people walk their dogs there, doesn't this need to, if there is a problem, doesn't this need to be addressed now anyway? And who would address that? If Mid-Penn has a project, they will have to address it. If they leave, then who has to address it? If you want it to be a park, then the public entity would have to do this cleanup. So these are all things to consider. It's just like, it's sort of like, what's the end game? The end game isn't whether this project gets built or not. Well, maybe if it gets built, that's an end game, but if it doesn't get built, that's not the end game. What's to happen with that parcel? If there are problems there, they need to be addressed anyway. Just, you know, just to encourage the community to look around and say, what do we want here? What do we want our roads to look like, our neighborhood streets? How big do we want them? All that. That it's unfortunate that it's not appropriate for a developer to come in and say, well, here's how your streets ought to work. That's backwards.
Okay, any other council clarifying questions? All right, I'm gonna open it up for public comment. I don't have any speaker slips. Does anybody want to speak on this issue? Sure.
Just a question. Is that letter you talked about available right now?
Yeah, they're all on the website.
It's on the website.
And there's some on the table out there?
It's out there.
And so the one page that's still a draft is then attached, and the letter from August 22nd is right here, part of it, but that's already been approved. All the letters we've got here to look at tonight are out there. If the extra copies are gone, there's always a copy in the binder, and it's always on the website. And we post those at least 3 days ahead.
Yep, all right, sure.
I have a question.
Please go up to the podium, give your name. That way it's picked up on the video.
Ann Rothman, Moss Beach. And my question is along the lines of, should something like this be built and it's 100% affordable? I know there's some concerns about the timeline. They had to build it because they had funds to build it at this time. But what about ongoing expenses down the road when you cannot ask your tenants to pay more than 30% of their income? So should anything happen, who's going to pay to fix something? You know, should there be a structural issue? Or, like you say, if they miss a hazard, like they've had in Hunter's Point, if anything like this happens, who then is on the hook? And, you know, I'm just concerned that because you're changing the LCP, it's not just density, which I definitely hear what you're saying, this is also changing the economics. I mean, it wasn't, like I said, previously, it wasn't intended to be 100% affordable. That changes the opportunity for market rate housing had it been there to pay for something. Should it be necessary, you could increase rents to pay for certain things, but you can't do that in this case. And it also changes the neighborhood. It changes the economics of the entire place.
Go ahead.
I will say that compared to a developer developing it and selling the parcels where each individual owner would be responsible, there's a certain advantage to having a single owner for the whole site. Mid-Penn has, I think it's 39 other developments. They already have to maintain all of them under a wide variety of conditions. They have money in the bank and then investments to cover that. If it's unexpectedly high, I don't know what happens. They would probably ask for public money. That's just purely a guess.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? Yes, Carl.
Well, I wasn't going to talk a lot tonight, but Lisa's presentation, I think, favors, and it's not too well masked, this project. And the project has not been built yet. I think that's a basic fact that we're dealing with here. And and the houses and the neighborhood that exists there is there. And there are probably too many houses right now in the neighborhood, and a lot of these were forced in by the county, and I do mean forced in. Serving their developers and builders, they allowed houses to be built on very chancy wells, so forth and so on, that shouldn't really have been put there in the first place, given the water system and the sewer system. But that's what we've got there now. So starting from right now, we don't have this 71-unit project. And if you go by something from, say, the healthcare industry, a primary principle, which is to do no harm, or it says first, do no harm. What if you applied that principle to developing on our coast side, which already has all of these overdevelopment problems? If you do a little mind experiment, do no harm. There is no way that this project does not do harm to the existing neighborhood there. It does harm. And it's not there yet. What if you accept this principle? Would you want to go to a doctor who did not follow that principle? Now, it's impossible to follow all the time, of course. There are places where you have to do harm to try to do good in the long run and all that sort of thing in healthcare. But just do the little mind experiment. We don't yet have the problems and the damage to our neighborhood that this thing will provide. And much of that damage is on streets that are already overloaded with cars. I happen to be a late night person, and I came home from work when I was working in the middle of the night very often, and the streets are lined with vehicles. Not just cars, but boats and RVs and everything else under the sun. And they're narrow. And you look at something like the traffic plan and so forth that's being forwarded here. You look at the outlets onto the highway from this, and so there's no way that this thing doesn't do harm to our neighborhood. And I think that should be an underlying premise here. Not the hypothetical people, and they aren't a well-defined population as it is, but not the hypothetical people who aren't there yet, but the harm to the neighborhood that is there. And when we talk about this Connect the Coast side and so forth, I don't know if all of you were at the meeting at in Moss Beach that was held for, one of the public meetings held for Connect the Coast side. There were way more challenges than acceptance of anything in that meeting held by Connect the Coast side. People were not sitting there just swallowing whatever Connect the Coast side had come up with. And then they had often the vague future, well, maybe we'll have to someday have lot retirement or whatever and so forth. But all of the other stuff they were talking about for the highway. So Connect the Coast side is in no way an answer to what we're talking about with our local traffic problems, neighborhood traffic problems, and so forth. It's just another study. That's about all.
Thank you. Anybody else with public comment? All right. I will answer personally, not for the council, on Carl's questions. I would love to see most development stopped on the coast, but there's no legal framework for it at the moment. So we would need to establish that legal framework, and so far we have not. That was one of the reasons I called for various experts and people who were interested in working on things like that last meeting, and so far nobody's come to me. They may have gone to other people. But it's a great, I mean, clearly, if we continue to build out, just allowing people to build what's legal, not even things that are quote unquote oversized, we are going to be in major trouble. We all know that. So I agree personally. All right. Any other public comment? I am going to close public comment then. Council discussion on the letter? Yeah.
who was the author of this amendment? Was it, or addition? Yeah, thank you for the hazardous, both of these sections. I hear what Carl's saying about comprehensive transportation management plan. Sure, it's not a panacea, but what I think the letter's saying is, it's not lauding the comprehensive transportation management plan as the end-all be-all, but it's saying, like, before, we've got Big Way, we've got this, we've got other things going on, and we still don't have a comprehensive plan, and so we're piecemeal, like, dealing with each of these situations individually without even an overarching strategy. And I felt like what the letter was saying was, can we have the overarching strategy so that we at least can have a visualization of where these pieces go in? So thank you for adding the part about the CTMP. And then I personally feel very strongly about the hazardous materials. I hear what you're saying. And I'm definitely concerned that, especially with asbestos that is laying in the soil, as lots of large multi-ton vehicles start driving around and disrupting the soil, that asbestos fibers, and the wind blows this way towards the neighborhood, all mitigation efforts for construction aside, I'm definitely concerned, and I don't even live in that neighborhood. I'm concerned for putting that asbestos airborne when all that mechanical equipment gets in there. So thank you for that. And once again, I'll say what I said last time, like, this is a pretty strong letter for the MCC. I guess I disagree with Carl. I didn't think that Lisa's letter was advocating or supporting the other one, but per what Dave said and what I said last time, which is the MCC, this body, there's a certain framework that we operate in, and it's not a body for personal advocacy or statements that maybe we feel strongly about, but we have to follow a certain procedural pattern, and I think that the council has, knowing these people individually and outside of this meeting, I feel like the council has really made a strong effort to stay that righteous official path. And while that may not satisfy people on either side of the issue, the MCC should be more for affordable housing. The MCC should protect the open spaces still on the coast side. As an observer, but also a participant, I've seen what the MCC has deliberated on and gone through, and I'm proud of the efforts of the MCC to try to pull these together in these official formats, which they have to be, which we can't say like, God, no, please don't do this. That's not something that Mike Shaw or anybody at county will listen to, and in fact, it will degrade our credibility. So every time we put out a letter, I mean, there's two things right here that we're asking, like, please address this. Now, whether the county does or not, okay. You know, we can send another letter. This is a second letter in a month on this because there were more issues that were brought up from the last meeting. I hope, and that's why I asked the question, will Mike put two and two together? I hope that they look at this. This is, to me, the hazardous materials is a critical thing. It's a military base, critical thing. We saw what happened with Hunters Point. I don't want those houses going in and people living there, and then we find out that there's a problem. So thank you for these 2 points in particular.
Okay. Any other council comments, discussion, clarifications? All right, do I hear a motion?
I move that we approve this letter as is.
Second? Somebody gonna second it?
You want to second it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I will second it. Call for.
Could we pause for just a
Sure.
sec? Could I ask other can we ask questions of other members of the council or in the council in general?
Gets a little iffy. I'll let you go with it. I may stop you.
Feel free to stop me. I would just ask the other members of the council who did not vote to second, which is fine. Could we make this letter better? What's the objections?
Well, I'll tell you mines. So when I first, 2 years ago, when I first took an oath and sworn in to this council to uphold all the duties, just like all my colleagues up here, I took an oath to uphold the written laws. Written law has been created since Roman times to prevent abuse and corruption. Just as verbal contracts cannot be guaranteed to be carried out properly, verbal laws cannot be guaranteed to be fair, and thus is unjust. And our duties are laid out in the Midcoast Community Council bylaws, written legal instrument we are to abide to. And specifically, in Article 1, Section 1.2, Item 3, it says, the purposes of the Community Council include the following: to seek to preserve the rural small town character of the area and seeking to manage growth in a manner which is consistent with the present character of the area. And so I cannot vote for this project as it is against these concepts as stated in the bylaw, a written legal instrument, as I repeat. And so I mean, if I mean, it's up to the pertinent authorities to change the bylaws or the written legal instrument if they want the council to follow something different, which would be the Board of Supervisors. But as stated in the bylaws, I cannot in good conscience vote for this project due to my respect for the rule of law.
Well, let me just,
Wait, Mr. Chair, I want to make a comment. I want to clarify, the motion on the table is to approve a letter of comments to the planner about the project application. It is not to approve the project in any way, shape, or form.
and I would just add to that this letter could be interpreted as a expression of opposition to this project. This letter is asking for more scrutiny, more action to be taken. That's why I'm voting for this letter. I think I've stated my position and my feeling on this project, but I'm voting for this letter because I want the county to undertake additional work on hazardous materials and a comprehensive transportation strategy before we just piecemeal start changing intersections and then later go, oh gosh, I wish we'd had a plan for this. So that's, to me, that's what I'm voting for, is more scrutiny on this project. I'm not voting to approve this project.
Okay.
And so that's why I was wondering from the rest of the council, what are objections that we could maybe amend this letter somehow to get approval for it?
Obviously, we need to understand what we're voting for, otherwise our vote's gonna be kind of weird. So, when we get a referral on an application, the MCC has opportunity for an extra step, an extra way to communicate. And this is not pro and con against a project. What we are asked to give is substantive comments on the issues involved with the project, so that to help the planner or county planning decide, if it complies. If we see something that's not right or that needs to be looked at further, we speak up and provide that. That's what this opportunity is for. This is to the planner. It is not to the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors. If we were to write a letter that said the MCC opposes this project flat out, no matter what you do about it, they would take one look and think they just don't understand the concept. Why do we bother sending them a referral? So if we have substantive comments, such as we submitted in the last letter, which is now apparently has required the applicant to do a resubmittal, this is useful. And this is a wonderful opportunity that we can do this. This has nothing to do with supporting the character, the semi-rural character of the Midcoast.
It's rural, as stated in the bylaw, small town.
I don't have it memorized, but I know what you're speaking about. And I don't know, I know I tried to say this several times at the last meeting, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I'm trying to do what's useful here. I'm trying to do the best we can to get the best input from the county, to get the best result we can. And if we get to the point when there is a staff report, when there is actually an environmental review document and a project application receipt at all those stages, and we get a staff report for a public hearing before a decision maker, then, and the staff report is inadequate, we still feel it's inadequate, then in that case we might say something about, well, the staff report is still inadequate, it doesn't address X, Y, and Z, therefore you can't make the findings, so therefore you should not approve this. But we are not there yet, by any means.
This is the beginning of a long process. All right, does anybody else wish to make a comment, ask a question? All right, and again, we are voting on this second addition to the comments we made in our letter at our last meeting. It's been moved and seconded. I've heard no amendments. I'll call for a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Abstaining? Okay, carries 4-1-1. Thank you. All right, agenda item 4B, mid-block Highway 1 vehicle access in West Moss Beach. Take it away, Lisa.
So once again, I don't have a presentation. We've had this on our agenda several times, and those presentations are linked to on with our meeting documents. So if you weren't here for that item, I don't know how much history I need to give, but we've all been over this before. Basically, on April 25th, most recently, we approved comments on the Moss Beach Chevron to reduce their highway access. The vote was 7-0. The motion was made by Dan. The only difference we're asking for in this request is to add a sidewalk, and then through the remaining access opening there to add a pedestrian striping. So since that April 25th comment from the MCC, this whole thing results from a violation back in 2011 when, without permits, they took out a landscape buffer in front of the gas station and left the wide open highway access. So we've been trying to get this addressed since 2014. Anyway, so they've been required to apply for a CDP to replace the landscape buffer, and this is just taking forever. So after we sent in our comments April 25th, we're still getting nowhere. We're getting pushback from staff, confusion there, and so I thought this new approach of looking at the 3 blocks that are zoned commercial in West Moss Beach and have some very similar issues, and send this to the supervisor and the heads of planning and public works and ask them for their help. So let me switch to the letter. So basically, we're asking for their support and assistance, and because this is in the Caltrans right away, Caltrans doesn't consider us a lead agency or anything. They don't listen to us. This has to come from the county. We have policies there are policies in place about limiting highway access in the middle of the block, and then the specifics in the letter for the 3 locations. So we have the second page, there's the picture of the 3 blocks. The yellow line is the estimated edge of the right-of-way. So the northern block, or the one on the right, where the taqueria is, the roadside vegetation has been worn away over the years. People take these shortcuts, and but there is access on Virginia to the on-site restaurant parking and also to the existing informal parking in the Caltrans right-of-way. So we request for that block to close the vehicle highway access along the edge of the paved shoulder, and which is the red line in the bottom picture. And we've since learned, since last spring, what Caltrans standards would apply there. It looks sort of like a curb, but they call it a dike. It's 6 inches high. And they just put that at the edge of the pavement. And this is similar to what's at La Costanera, and they actually just approved something like this at La Costanera for a little section of coastal trail there. has the Caltrans specs, so we know that's what they would require. So that was one hurdle. So, and then we asked, because Dan had expressed concerns at our, at another meeting we had on this topic, that people slowing down to make the right turn on Virginia would cause congestion. So we're asking for the shoulder there for the fog line to be marked so it's a deceleration lane. So if you're going to turn at Virginia, you turn onto the shoulder, and that way you won't block traffic. I was hoping that would address Dan's concern. Then in the middle block, the thought is, since development has been proposed there, that the same thing will happen unless we do a similar curve in that block out along the edge of the pavement. And so we're asking for the same thing there. Then the most southern block, the gas station, basically, like we say, we've been over and over this with the county, and we asked for the pictures, that the two bottom pictures show the, what do you call that tanker thing, the two tankers, what do you call that?
Gasoline tankers, what I call them.
Yeah, so they pull in, they can manage the whole thing, but they don't need that wide open frontage. They pull in on Virginia, you can see the tanker pulls, and then he pulls out on the other end of the gas station. So what we're asking for is to reduce this, what is it, 144-foot wide vehicle access, and we just reduce it down to 60 feet, which is generous. And then you have the predictable circulation through the gas station, instead of the cars just all lining up there and shooting out in every direction as soon as there's a gap and you don't know where anybody's going, and if you're a pedestrian, God help you. So, so we're reiterating what we said before, and I want, like I say, now this is going to the supervisor, and because the planners that have been involved in trying to address this gas station issue we're just not getting anywhere. So reduce the access, replace the landscape buffer, take it all the way to the corner and connect with the sidewalk on Virginia. Don't reduce any of restore the full amount of landscaping, no new impervious surface. And also, now we learn things as we go along. We've learned about Caltrans has the, what do they call it here? Where is it? Complete Streets?
Yeah, the Complete Streets
Caltrans
program.
Complete Streets policy should provide for a sidewalk connecting to the one in Vermont and along this front planting strip. And then when the pedestrians get to the 60-foot opening on the south end, there would be some striping so they could hopefully make it across safe. Just trying to encourage, make it safe and comfortable for bicyclists and pedestrians so that we are not so dependent on our cars. That's the point of that. So that's the letter that I propose we send. And, oh, I know, one other thing, also in some of these discussions we've had about highway access in the past, Brandon had raised a concern about sidewalks, not wanting sidewalks. And so this does request the sidewalk there in front of the gas station, and I just wanted to assure Brandon that as we learned with the recent Coastal Commission approval at La Costanera, they got a CDP amendment to open their patio, and part of the things they have to do is improve this trail, public trail through their property. Part of it goes along in the Caltrans right-of-way right in front, and they're gonna put in a sidewalk and a little bit of landscaping in this curb. And this is in their right-of-way, but they're gonna, the restaurant paying for it, they're required to put it in. They get an encroachment permit from Caltrans to do the work, and so it's all laid out in there that they're responsible to maintain this sidewalk. And so whatever project, and we also saw this at Surfers Beach when the county did the project to improve the coastal trail there, and they put the stairs down to the beach over the riprap. And as I understand it, at that, somewhere I'm sure it's written up, Caltrans is responsible for the staircase and the county is responsible for the trail. So whatever results at the gas station or wherever it's in the Caltrans right-of-way, you can be confident that who's responsible for the sidewalk will be laid out in that contract.
So the property owners who are responsible for the sidewalk are also liable for the sidewalk as well, correct?
Well, I'm not an attorney. I can only assume that makes sense.
It would depend on the terms of the encroachment permit.
Got
All right.
So that's my presentation.
Any clarifying questions for the council? Chris?
So Lisa, this is kind of a distillation with a couple of new requests, but
Well,
you were saying, I guess my first question is, you politely were saying that county staff wasn't quite getting it, or, I mean, is that what, I mean?
the
what-
violation at the gas station has been, over the years, there's been a number of reasons that has stalled out. First, early on, it was a lack of staff in code compliance. And then, I don't really know what it was. It was like the planner would send out a referral and then, nothing happened for a year, and I don't understand. Then the fire department commented and said, well, this would be too dangerous. And it doesn't make any sense because you see the tanker truck going through there. And clearly, the fire truck could get in there. Why they would want to go in next to a burning building, I don't know, because they could park on that huge wide shoulder. But, so we finally got planning staff to talk with the fire marshal and say, well, yeah, it's okay if you do that. And then, I don't know, there's just been confusion and then large gaps in time. And, you know, we did have this on our agenda last June, and we talked about the other locations, and part of the motivation there was, not only had people in the community complained about the other locations, but also I thought, well, this is a consistent thing we're asking for, because like in the safety and mobility study, it said in the future, you know, a consistent edge for the highway and a place for pedestrians to walk. So, and then also learning that, my understanding is now that as far as something like this, it's in the Caltrans right-of-way, basically, if we don't have the supervisor's report, it's not gonna happen, support.
Yeah.
It won't happen. So that's the approach that I'm taking now. And the reason, I know we talked about Surfer's Beach the last time, and the reason it's not addressed here is because I think it's better separate. The issues are somewhat different there as to far as what the edge might be or whatever, and also you have the potential of the adjacent property owner, GCSD, could potentially be the lead agency for that issue. So that's why that's not here. This is just my speech.
So we're basically elevating this up the ladder a notch because for whatever the reasons over time, we can't, nothing's we can't get any traction on this particular issue, and so the hope is that, especially because we're dealing with Caltrans, we need Supervisor Horsley's support. We're going the next step up the ladder, talking to him, DPW head, and Steve Monowitz. This letter is directly to them. Do you anticipate better reception this time?
I guess I'd consider this the last ditch effort. If we don't get traction here, we might as well just give up on it.
Okay, any other council clarifying questions? Does anybody in the audience wish to comment on this? Questions? Anything else? Okay. Close the audience comment. Any discussion on the council?
I'm just, go ahead, Dan.
Okay, I'm just gonna kind of repeat what I said last meeting. As far as the gas station, you know, I think it's a great idea to have that planter replaced where it was. I think it's a bad idea to close off the northern portion from Highway 1. The reason being is there's essentially a natural deceleration lane. If somebody wanted to enter the gas station that was driving southbound, wouldn't have to come to an abrupt stop and make a slow 90-degree turn onto Vermont. Be able to make just a natural, you know, merge over, decelerate, and enter the gas station. So I think that this concept of forcing a patron of the gas station to slow down to the degree they have to make a slow right angle turn. That alone will have a very negative impact to the flow of Highway 1. I'm not in favor of any kind of sidewalk or any further urbanization of this area. So, you know, I probably wouldn't have a problem if you could just stop that red line, and just focus on replacing the planter area. As far as the taqueria, again, I strongly believe that by blocking that whole area, what would result is a grave financial impact to a local immigrant mom and pop establishment that is a great benefit to more locals in the area than have ever even come to any of our meetings. So I'm gonna vote no on this letter.
Okay. Anybody else have comments? Yeah, go ahead.
So it looks to me, based on what you told me about the regarding sidewalk of the property owner being responsible, getting an encroachment permit and developing sidewalk, it seems to me this is very similar to how triple net leases work. And if I remember correctly, in triple net leases, if someone gets sued, it's both the tenant and the property owner in a triple net lease that's both liable. So I'm not sure if that is the case for the sidewalk. If both Caltrans and the adjacent property owner is liable, or just Caltrans itself. But the liability, I'm really hesitant to go for it with the sidewalk unless the liability issue is cleared up, and as well as the expenses for the sidewalk as well. I just am hesitant based on, I mean, these type of lawsuits happens all the time. There's a lot of frivolous lawsuits that's thrown around based on tripping on sidewalks all the time, so this is pretty a serious liability issue for me.
So the entire Caltrans right-of-way in front of the gas station, which is wide enough for two large trucks to park next to each other, sort of like a truck stop ambiance, pretty much the whole length of the block, it's all paved with asphalt. It's asphalt from the east side of the highway to the back of the gas station. The whole gas station is asphalt. So don't understand why adding a safe place for pedestrians to walk makes that more urban. There's no dirt there at all. It's all paved. And as far as people not wanting to slow for the turn onto Vermont and wanting to kind of angle in at a higher speed, I just, there is this wide shoulder from Vermont all the way down to the opening, the 60-foot wide opening that will still be there on the highway frontage for people to coast in and turn into the gas station there. They don't need to use Vermont if they don't want, if they're going southbound. So I guess I'm confused. I do try to draft MCC letters taking into consideration votes that the council has made in the past and figure, well, that's what they want. And since Dan made the motion for this improvement at the gas station, I assumed he was for it. But anyway, that's all I have to say. Thanks.
All right. Any other comments?
I just have another question.
Okay.
So you're just saying the sidewalk is just for the Chevron block, correct?
Just for the Chevron, it's next to the landscape buffer that they have to
Got it.
restore, that they took out.
And it won't happen on the
No.
Vermont to Verde?
The other two, are all we're asking for is the asphalt curb at the edge of the pavement.
it.
That's it.
Got it. Understood.
Lisa, can you clarify I'm not sure what you're talking about, but I made a motion.
So we had this on our, let's see,
April, I think it's,
we had this on our agenda, the Moss Beach Chevron on April 25th. It's in the minutes. We approved comments. The only thing different then, there was no sidewalk there, but we approved the comments, closing it off just as it is here, and you made the motion to approve that letter.
Okay, I don't remember that. If I did, you know, I never would have approved. I must have misunderstood, so
Well, there was the same visual then in that letter that we got here now.
okay, well, I would never have approved. If I did that, in fact, it was a mistake somehow.
all right. Fine to clarify that. I will say that from a safety perspective, people driving in and out from both northbound and southbound into that gas station, at quote unquote random places, my wording, that entire block is incredibly dangerous. And in fact, you see people driving across the double yellows, which is illegal because it's easy to do. And for the Taqueria, I have made a very strong effort to stop just driving off the shoulder instead coming through the Vermont. And it adds an extra 5 seconds to getting there. I've still got a braking period. And the last few times I've been there, I've seen people just come tearing straight out onto the highway from that dirt. And it's pretty scary to watch. So I am totally in favor of blocking that off from a safety perspective. I do not think it will impact their business at all. Parking area will still be there. That's
So the
a very
parking
personal
area-
personal opinion.
Yeah, the parking area is very limited, and it's very difficult to get in and out of it, very narrow.
It's actually not. I see
That's my
good-sized
opinion.
trucks coming in and out the Vermont driveway, excuse me.
I go there a lot.
So the parking area, there's two places. They have their on-site parking, and then also from Virginia, there's an opening in the curb where you can go and park where people currently park on the gravel shoulder in the right of way.
Sorry.
That would still be available, and something, actually, that area may be actually more useful for parking once it's not used as a wide open driveway, because then you can drive right up next to it and park.
So you're suggesting that the public make essentially a 180-degree U-turn
It's two right turns,
to enter that,
yes.
that driveway that you just mentioned?
Yeah,
I mean,
you're
a car would
right,
almost have to come to a
exactly.
complete stop on Highway 1.
Well, you're about to stop on the dirt anyway, otherwise you go right through the Taqueria. So I don't think that's a big problem.
No, what I think Lisa's suggesting is entering the dirt lot between the highway and the restaurant.
Yeah, I do that all the
In
time
order
now.
to do that from the going southbound, you essentially have to make a complete U-turn.
That's right.
And you're suggesting that that's not gonna impact traffic.
It impacts traffic no more than people who are turning west on Vermont from Highway 1 already.
I disagree.
Yeah, that's a personal opinion. Okay, if there are no other comments,
I'm sorry,
sure, go ahead.
just one more thing is that when we look at a later issue that's on our agenda, it's dealing with La Costanera, my two favorite restaurants on the coast, El Gran Amigo and La Costanera. And the years-long effort that the MCC has made to just ask them to comply with LCP and other policies and laws. And they were up to a $500,000 fine like a year ago. I guess there's a consent agreement where that's gonna be mitigated to something else, but letter after letter that the MCC sent that was misunderstood or not handled by the county planners, and certainly ignored by the business owner. And I'm not advocating that we have to go by the letter of the law on everything. I think that's a definite mistake that is made, that just the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. But I do see a public safety issue here, and I do see, as Lisa has pointed out, at least 3 specific policies that apply here. And I guess the philosophical question I ask is, if we say, all right, you know what, we'll just let this one go, or this one property owner who, without a permit, removed something that should have been there, should still be there. I mean, where's the line of like, what's okay and what's not okay? I mean, these are clearly violations of established policies being done, and MCC is advocating that they be applied for public safety reasons, not for personal issues. We don't want anything there, or we want something there, or whatever it is, personal safety issues. And essentially, to me, fairness to other property owners, businesses, and individuals who are following the rules, who do have that barrier there. The mixed-use project that's gonna go in the block between those two, between the gas station and El Gran Amigo, has a design that has no entrances to Highway 1 along Highway 1. There are entrances to their establishment, their parking lot, off of the side streets, Virginia and Vermont. El Gran Amigo would still have 2 access points off Virginia and California, I believe. And the gas station similarly would have 2 entry points, one off of Side Street and one off of Highway 1. So to me, it's a fairness issue, it's a public safety issue, and I need to know that when are laws going to be enforced? When are policies going to be enforced? Or is it just at a whim of whoever is the planner or whoever is making the decision? Or should things be applied the same to everybody? And so for me personally, I don't think it's fair that this, especially the one business that removed the barrier without a permit. I don't think it's fair to businesses that are trying to follow these policies, and so that's why I support this one.
Okay. Any,
I'll-
Barbara?
I'll piggyback on top of what Chris said. Being that I live right by there, I walk by there all the time, just waiting for an accident to happen because of the way you come out of those businesses. I support it as well. Years ago, when that was a burger place, there wasn't a way to get onto the highway. That's just been made by people using it. And I think it's really dangerous. It dips down, it can do damage to cars, so I agree, I support this, and thank you for writing it.
All right. Do I hear a motion?
I move that we approve this letter as written.
And I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Call for a vote. All in favor? 5. And opposed?
Opposed.
1. Okay, carries 5-1. Thank you. And third regular agenda item. I hope this one will go a little faster. It's motherhood and apple pie, I think. The Airport Street bulk propane facility, application for a CDP to legalize their additions. And again, this is Lisa's item.
So, once again, no presentation, we've had this on our agenda before, the slide presentations are posted on our website. Since then, the smaller tanks that stored there, and the one that exploded, they've been removed. The county position is that the $15,000 gallon tank is grandfathered, but they're requiring a CDP to legalize all the other stuff they have there that did without permits, the 8-foot perimeter fence and some storage containers and whatnot. So we have a referral to comment on this CDP application. Significantly, the fire marshal's comments on this referral include a requirement for a fire hydrant within 500 feet, delivering 1,500 gallons per minute. And just to point out that this is virtually the same location as Big Wave, and they need a 4,400-foot long water main extension to reach their property, so this is not insignificant, the requirement for a fire hydrant. I don't know whether they'll go back on that, but anyway, that was interesting. And also, I looked up, somebody mentioned maybe it was Mike Ferrer mentioned about the Coastal Act was amended in 2016, and it gives the Coastal Commission the authority to consider environmental justice when making permit decisions. This parcel is in the Coastal Commission appeal zone. So basically the letter, this is on the referral, even though the tank is grandfathered, the letter dives right in about the tank, the fact this is next to the affordable housing community and the hazards and discomfort we have had to endure over the decades, and that in addition to the environmental justice implications of this incompatible hazardous land use, external hazards of this site include the location in the airport safety zone. It's right across the street from the runway, and it's in the tsunami inundation zone. And in bold here it says, for the public health, safety, and welfare, this facility should be moved to a more suitable location away from vulnerable residents and external hazards. And then it just wraps up with getting back to the task at hand, commenting on the perimeter fence. I don't like the fence. Goes into detail, and also the properties infested with ciabatta grass, they need to eradicate that, so that's the letter. And this is copied to the supervisor, and it's copied to Steve Monowitz too, because of this kind of complex issue that I think upper staff has been looking at as to what they could do and couldn't do there, and also copying the planner at the Coastal Commission.
Okay. Any clarifying questions from the council?
There's not gonna be any more propane stored there, or is
The
there?
15,000-gallon
Is
tank is
propane.
there and working, and the county says it's grandfathered, and there's nothing they can do, but we'll see.
But the smaller tanks that were
The smaller
stored
tanks
there
are
without
gone.
permits are gone.
Yes.
I guess I'm sorry, Barbara. You
Well, no,
want-
that's, I support, they certainly do need a fire hydrant, that's for sure.
Well,
'Cause that's-
the hope was that the requirement for a fire hydrant would make them move.
Would make them not do it, yeah.
Yeah, per the grandfathered in, I remember our last discussion. I mean, is that true that there's documentation to that, or is it that just
Well,
kind of like, yeah, I remember and
You
it was
know
there
how-
and we think it's
You know
grand?
how that is, like the 7th Street fence, there was the assumption that there was an encroachment permit because it had been referred to in a letter that there was an encroachment
Right.
permit, but nobody had that permit. And in this case, there was something that happened in the 80s where the property owner changed hands and something happened, and the county's interpretation is that that makes the tank legal. But, you know, our point here is that they keep having these gas leaks and saying, oh, operator error. And it's like, you know, whatever. It's all here in the letter. I didn't want to read the whole thing, but.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anybody in the audience wish to comment on this or question? All right, I'll close audience comment. Any discussion on the council? Yeah, Bruce?
Well, I can remember the last meeting, Supervisor Horsley was here, and it made a big impression on him. There was a lot of people from the community here, and they talked about their experience living next to this. This was when it was having the leaks, and there was a cloud one day, and people had to go to the hospital. And I made the comment then, and I'll make again now, that, Lisa, I know you do live near there. I don't think anybody would be happy having this yard, that they were storing tanks and off-gassing the remnants of whatever was left in these individual tanks. And so I guess I love the bold statement here, bold in two different ways. My, I guess, concern or question is about the mercaptan, which is the supposedly inert compound that is packaged with propane so you can smell it. And that's what was off-gassing. And that's heavier than air and it settles into the ground.
So those tanks are gone.
Right, but whatever off-gas and settled in the ground, in my opinion, is not gone. And so if I had my druthers, I would be saying, no CDP should be even considered until environmental testing is done on this piece of property. How much mercaptan is in the soil there that's also, that drains to the marine, to the Fitzgerald Marine Preserve or the Monterey Bay Sanctuary. Again, once again, a thing done without permit that's now being asked to, after the fact, you know, clean this up with, well, let's get the permits for it. We'll do a couple of things and we'll get the permits for it. I just don't understand how these things keep happening, that stuff is allowed to happen. I almost want to do an experiment at my house. What could I get away with at my house until the county finally came and said, you can't do this. You literally cannot do this. We're stopping it. Because it seems like as long as you can just do it, maybe not, at some not decades down the line, you'll have to get a CDP after the fact. So I am very concerned for the people that live there and for the environment downstream from that, going out to the lagoon, where we love to see the birds in the lagoon there, that there is mercaptan poisoning in the soil there. And I guess I would ask, almost as a rhetorical, just feel the pulse of the council, like, what does the council think about soil poisoning there, and is it worth discussing adding another line in there about, as a condition for a CDP review, even review for a CDP, the property owner should have to have some kind of environmental testing of the soil and possibly the groundwater underneath it.
Personally, I don't know that much about
Once they get this permit, you know, we're not getting anything else out of that. Thank goodness they removed the tanks, but that huge tank is still there. It could still blow up.
Maybe they won't get the permit, maybe it'll be appealed to the coastal commission, we don't know.
Okay.
I guess I read these documents because, you know, the fire marshal's comment said something about, this, NFPA thing, and they said chapter 80, and I looked that up, that got nothing to do with, LPG gas, but it's this chapter 58, and I read all that stuff, and how to do this fire safety analysis and all this stuff, and nowhere in there did they talk about mercaptan and what it does, whether it moves through the soil. I don't know anything about mercaptan, and so I'm not inclined to stick my neck out there.
Right, and that's kind of the point I made last time, is like, nobody has really, it's just been kind of like, well, mercaptan, it's inert or whatever, but I went and looked on the CDC website, and it's listed as a I'm sorry, what?
Carcinogen?
Yes, thank you, that's the word I was looking for, as a, you know, potential carcinogen, and that has been going on, that was going on for years and years, and that mercaptan settling into the soil for years and years. Okay, so I'm feeling that the council is not wanting to dig into mercaptan. I can understand that, but this feels like, oh, sorry.
If we had the research already, then I think that might be appropriate. I mean, it's a gas soluble organic. It's absolutely not inert in any way.
Right.
As anybody
right.
sprayed by a skunk would know. It's the same thing, basically. It's something we could bring up again in the future, but I think we should have more knowledge before we put it in the letter.
I hear that, and I'm willing to move on. I would just say that I just feel that, you know, this is one of those things, like, in the future, things are already gonna be hardened, and there'll be no, like, going back to look at mercaptan. This is our chance. We at least got those empty tanks out of there, that's something. A couple other things, on the CDP permit that was included with our packet of materials, I noticed that in the project info section, wetlands, including marshes, swamps, and mudflats, or creeks, streams, lakes, and ponds was not checked. Is this affecting that, this CDP application? I guess I was under the impression that that was some kind of slough.
No.
I guess Big Wave showed us that that land
Well, Big Wave is
doesn't
much
matter.
closer to the wetlands. This parcel's right out on Airport Street.
Okay. And then there was another box not checked, box P between C and nearest public road was not checked at all. In a lower section, it did say that it was, between the nearest public road and the C,
Yeah, well, the
but
county knows that full well, and we know that full well. This is, and they've sent a referral to the coastal commission, so it's appealable.
okay, I'm just
I mean,
saying,
it's
like,
big way, it's the same as big
I
way.
know, you feel like if that goes through, anything can, but I just, I really, if I was living closer, I would be looking to move, because I just feel that there was years and years of mercaptan in that soil. It's a chemical, it's not safe, and I would like to know what's in there. But I will settle for this strong, boldly worded statement, which I completely agree with.
Okay. Any other council questions, comments, discussion? All right, call for a motion. Somebody want to make a motion?
I'll go
I'll
for the
make a
hat trick.
motion that we approve the Airport Street bulk propane facility
Okay,
letter.
A second?
all right, moved and seconded, all in favor? Carries 6-0, thank you very
7-0.
much.
Oh, yes.
No,
you're
6.
right. I forgot.
I'm sure Claire would have voted yes.
And we're on to our last regular agenda item, which not quite motherhood and apple pie, but this is request county adoption of updated tsunami ban maps for the general plan hazards maps. So the history on this is that the county general plan has hazards maps for all kinds of things. The one of interest tonight is tsunami. Covers fire, covers flood, covers a number of other things. The LCP incorporates those maps by reference. And then the county planning ordinance also incorporates the general plan maps. So at one point, and the current maps are dated 1973, accepted 1976. They are on paper somewhere, I'm sure in a legible form. Every single existing online copy is completely illegible as far as I can tell. I've looked for several of them, they're all the same. But more importantly than that, the science has changed a lot. There was a California map done in 2009, which played a part in the approval of the fire station development down here, and was apparently being used by the county for a while in looking at whether development was in the tsunami zone or not. But then at some point, they went back to the general plan map, and we don't know why. My guess is they did it because county council pointed out, no, you have to use the one that's in the general plan, because that's what the law says. So this is a request to the planning department to adopt an updated tsunami hazards map to be used for planning purposes. Whether it's the 2009 one or some newer one, that's a different question, but we're asking for an updated one. So that is the gist of the letter. That's the rationale behind it. Does anybody have any clarifying questions? Yes, go ahead.
What map would be the best replacement?
Well, the best extant one is the one that's on the website for this meeting, is the 2009 map prepared by the state of California and a number of other bodies. It's was based on the best science they had at that point. There were debates about its accuracy in various details, but still, it's certainly better than the 1973 map.
And what are the major changes from the 1973 map to the 2009 map?
Part of it is the size of tsunamis, and part of it is the analysis of the energy of the tsunami, and therefore how far it will go inland at various points. It's not just an elevation issue.
It's, for example, the 73 map shows the, just in Miramar, it just kind of along Murata Road, just that first road is covered. And and all the rest of Miramar no longer in the tsunami zone. And, you know, they forced these houses to be built on a sort of an empty first floor with breakaway walls. And, you see a number of those in West Miramar, and now they're no longer in the tsunami zone. And also, it used to go up to Obispo Road and right in front of the, new fire station thing, and that's why they had to see exactly where the line was on Obispo Road. Now it's west of the Burnham Strip. I mean, it's dramatic. It's been changed, and this came to my attention because we got a referral for a new house in Miramar. It's next to Murata Surf. It's next to the trailhead there on Magellan, next to that corrugated metal house. And there had been a house approved for that parcel in 2012 with the whole first story empty thing and the whole house up above, and it never got built, and I was aware of that house. And then this new house, they didn't build that, it's a new owner, they come in with a new plan, and it's just a regular house on the ground. And I said to the planner, but isn't this in the tsunami zone? Not anymore.
Yeah, so basically, we would like a more up-to-date tsunami zone map for hazards. I believe some of the other hazards maps have been updated over time. It's a little harder to track them down, but the tsunami hazards map has not been updated. Any other clarifying questions?
Yes.
Yeah,
You know, so how can we be assured that, you know, this is accurate? Obviously, history has shown that certain property owners benefit from a new, tsunami map. I mean, what assurance do we have that, you know?
Well, they're benefiting from the old map. The newer maps will all cover more ground. I can't think of a single place on the entire coast where an updated map would show that it's no longer in a tsunami zone where it was in the 73 map. It's far more the other direction. That the 2009 map prepared by the state shows a much greater land area in all areas than the 1973 map.
But the firehouse in El Venado was in the tsunami zone, and now it's not, so.
In the 2009 map, which again was not ever adopted by the general plan, it was right on the upper edge of Obispo Road, as best as I can tell. But yes.
But doesn't that just contradict what you just said, though?
No, that's the 2009 map. That was the brief period where county planning was looking at the 2009 maps. They're not using those, they're back to the 1973 map again.
What was the reason for that? Why have they?
Because
We don't really know, they're not
we
giving
don't, we
us the
don't know,
whole story.
but that is the one that's called out in the general plan and the zoning ordinances and the LCP. And so they have to adopt an updated map in the general plan for all of those to get the new.
Well, before I vote on the letter, I'd like to have more information about, you know, how are they gonna determine and, actually see some more areas, and instead of just giving a blank check to say, hey, go ahead and update your maps.
Well, okay, so for those of you who've never dealt with a general plan update, I have been going to the Half Moon Bay general plan meetings for quite a while. It is a really big, long, drawn-out, huge amounts of public input process, and the county will have to do the same thing. So I don't think we have to worry about very much. I gave an example of a map they might want to choose because it already exists, but if they want to do a newer one, commission a newer one that takes 10 years worth of sea level rise data into account that was not in the 2009 map, that would be great. So I don't want to try and, you know, bound them. It is a general plan update to change that map.
So basically, all we're asking here is that an updated tsunami hazard map using latest science be added to the county general plan hazard maps.
Which, aside from resources issues, is pretty much, you know, apple pie.
It's like, it just doesn't seem right for them to have made an effort to modify their boundary with the latest science for a while, and then say, well, no, let's go back and use the 73 map because that's what we had in the general plan, and we'll just go back to the old standard. And at the same time, they're saying, so the people that are no longer in the tsunami zone for building standards, they still have to have an evacuation plan for the tsunamis. I mean, clearly, they're still in the tsunami. I mean, it's just, what we're asking for is the county to have some kind of process to keep up with the latest science is all.
Well, a cynic might say that, they went back to the 73 map, and during that time, two massive projects that were previously in the tsunami zone, suddenly not an issue anymore.
Which ones you talking about?
Talking about Big Wave and the fire station.
No, I think Big Wave is still in the tsunami zone.
Obviously not an issue.
Even in
Obviously not an
the
issue.
73 map, no, it was, they were forced to not occupy
Yeah,
the
they're
bottom
up on the
floor of the
second
wellness
floor.
center,
We'll
Right,
see.
for exactly that reason.
just like the houses in Miramar, they're built to withstand a tsunami, so to speak.
All right, if we're done with clarifying questions, I'll ask, is there any public comment? Carl?
Just picking up on what either Dan or Chris said, I think it would be fair to refer in the letter to the authority, the recognized authority for establishing tsunami zones. Probably the USGS, but it might be, who knows, NOAA or something other than that. Going with most up-to-date science, you can rent a scientist to tell you anything, you know, a credentialed scientist to tell you anything, as I've discovered through many, many, many environmental impact reports. And this has occurred with the county a few times over. It's occurred with Caltrans on their projects on the coast side and so forth. So if you could refer to an authority on tsunamis, that would be good. My other comment is the West Miramar area in the county jurisdiction has, it's along the lines of what Chris was saying. Things just happened there. County people repeatedly, even with objections being raised, there was something like much of that area, if not all of it, was supposed to be a 10,000 square foot lot for building. They've approved variance after variance after variance, and many of those places that have been built there in the last 20 years or whatever are much smaller than 10,000 square foot lots and so forth. And the reason for the 10,000 square foot lot was to, again, with the tsunami idea and so forth, to have a less dense population in that area. So the more you can refer to authority along these lines, the better it goes.
Well, that's the last paragraph of the letter here. It says, we suggest the maps prepared by the California Emergency Management Agency, California Geological Survey, and the University of California, which is the map from 2012. It's in the letter.
Yeah, and the problem is there is no quote-unquote authority on tsunami zones. What there are many, many different research studies and generating models, and that's why this map was done. It was using the input from all of those bodies, but there's nobody responsible at the federal or state level, or possibly there's at the state level now, for establishing tsunami zones. All right, any other comments? Okay, I will close public comment on this. Come back to the council. Any further discussion? All right. Do I hear a motion?
I move we approve the letter as drafted.
Second?
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? 4, and against? 2. All right, carries 4-2. Thank you. All right, we are on to council activity. Does anybody have anything they want to report?
I'll start.
All right, go for it, Barbara.
I did the bicycle and pedestrian count 3 different times. We did the same, Ellie and I did the same area. It was really interesting. There's not a lot of activity in El Granada in the mornings, but the coastal trail's really busy.
Yes.
Yeah, and do you get do we ever get results? on
Yeah.
that? Or we
Yeah.
will? That's close, okay. And then I went on September 11th to the Views and Brews at the Half Moon Bay Brewery. They had Rich Gordon and Supervisor Horsley were there for to discuss housing in the county. And they put out these 2 booklets. One is if you want to do a second unit, it's a workbook on how to get yourself through, how to get through all the red tape, and then another booklet on different ideas for the second units. And it was a really informative meeting. And we got our encroachment permit from Caltrans for Adopt a Highway. So we'll be contacting them, and I'll report at the next meeting. Hopefully we'll have our safety class started up and go to that. And, last night Lisa and I went to the trail meeting for how do you say it?
The Ohlone
Ohlone?
Portola Heritage
Portola
Trail.
Heritage Trail. That's gonna be really cool. I'm looking forward to that. That's it.
Anybody else? Brandon?
So me and Chris have been talking to Dr. Jane Euster, the superintendent of the Cabrillo School District, and Donald Horsley, Supervisor Don Horsley, regarding whether we can, and we're getting some positive feedbacks on about using the funds in Measure M to create a community center here on the Midcoast, and progress. We're getting progress done, and we're going to be reporting back on any further information we can get from Dr. Euster, and possibly we might be invited to meeting with architectures as well.
Great.
Brandon, could you clarify a little bit? You said progress. Can you elaborate? What's taking place?
So right now, we've been planning with Dr. Euster, talking about some potential ideas of how the community center could take place, specifically in El Granada Elementary School, and how some of the facilities will be rebuilt, how everything will be torn down, and that we're going to be, and she did propose that there'd be a separate building in one of the lots, I believe, and as well as being able to use the new NPR building, which will be rebuilt as well for after-school use and on weekend use as a complementary, supplementary building for the community use, as well as the recreational facilities to be used by the community.
Since there's very limited space there, it sounds like we're talking about tearing down the existing school and replacing it with a multi-level, maybe a parking structure?
I don't think we can get into, there's no plans of specifics like that. We weren't even on an official mission from MCC. I know that you're interested in it too, Dan. I'm interested in Brandon's. We're feeling out the district, the school district, to see what interest they had and what willingness they had to work with us on this. And their Superintendent Euster's comments were essentially a non-binding that she intends to make full use of the Measure M money for the benefit of the schools, and that could include completely rebuilding El Granada Elementary and Fairlawn. And if and when that takes place, she has invited the MCC and the community to weigh in and participate in that redevelopment that could, and she's open to the idea, include a community center. You know, it would be on one of the, we initially went there, and I'll just end there because I don't want it to be an agenda item, but we have also, Brandon has talked to Supervisor Horsley to see what the county is willing to, how they're willing to participate. So that's all, we're not even at an agenda item. we're on the MCC, but we are interested community members that are trying to see if we can develop this into an MCC agenda item where it's more specific, more detailed, but we needed to get a pulse first and see is CUSD even in on this, and they're interested.
Okay, great. Anybody else?
Tomorrow here at 10:30, the Coastside Design Review Committee is holding a workshop, a 4-hour workshop. They are looking at making modifications to the part of the LCP that applies to the Design Review District. And so tomorrow we're going through a workshop where we'll be looking at, talking about what do we need to do, what are some things that need to be added. I'll just, as one example, they talked about showing pictures or specific examples, because if you've ever looked at the CDRC standards for the community, they're relatively subjective. There's not a lot of hard and fast measurements or exact numbers or anything. And so it can get a bit loose in the meetings as to who's interpreting these standards. One thing that has been suggested is adding pictures of when we say, lower the plates and hip the roofs so that the view is, impact is mitigated. There's a picture or a drawing of that gives them a better understanding to the builder, the applicant, of what this standard is and how we're applying it and what they could do to better meet that standard. That's just one example of the kind of updates that we're looking at. So that's tomorrow here in this room from 10:30 to 2, I believe.
Okay. Anybody else? Lisa.
Let's see, I attended the Harbor Commission Climate Change Resilient Committee meeting August 14. Their consultant, Brad Damitz, gave an update on the pilot Surfers Beach Restoration Project. That's the new name for it, beach restoration, being planned for next year. The Marine Sanctuary has given permission to use a hydraulic pump with an outlet above mean high tide, which is significant because it's a lot easier than trucking the sand over. The Harbor District is working on a comprehensive management plan for launch ramp dredging with a multi-year permit to cover more than one dredging event. One thing that comes up is the sedimentation at the launch ramp from Deer Creek could be solved long-term by rerouting Deer Creek south along the Burnham Strip and then over to Surfers Beach. But for the Harbor District, they're thinking, well, that involves multiple landowners, and it didn't sound like they're willing to take the lead on that, but it's a very intriguing idea. I mean, the creek would even be kind of fun on the Burnham Strip. Anyhow, that's my thought. Next thing is the Coastal Commission hearing on La Costanera CDP amendment was on September 13, and I did post that on our news blog, on our homepage, but I just wanted to give you a little more info. Because I watched the live stream of the hearing, and the applicant's representative, Mark Massara, didn't miss the opportunity to ask for wintertime brunch, Sunday brunch, restaurant hours to help pay for the improvements that they have to make. And he said that that would be from the first Sunday after Labor Day to the weekend before Memorial Day. That's winter. One commissioner pointed out that defined winter as 9 months long. But even Coastal Commissioner Carol Groom, she's also county supervisor, said she was open to considering the daytime restaurant hours in a couple of years. The vote on the amendment was 9-1, with Commissioner Pendleton, I don't know where he's from, he's new, opposed because he didn't think the restaurant should have to pay for the state park's lot improvements or be prohibited from daytime hours. And he mentioned that what a great success and visitor destination Sam's Chowder House is, even though they have inadequate parking. September 26th, today, I went to the Tree Regulations Update Committee's, the last meeting. Is that a dog?
I thought it was somebody's phone. I thought it was
The next steps will be more review by staff and county council, then circulation of an environmental review document. They'll come and make a presentation here, planning commission hearings, board of supervisors hearings, and then the coastal commission. By that point, it's like next spring. So, but anyway, it's finally moving along. There was a long gap in that project, because when planners got pulled away to other projects. And I did have a chance to speak with Joe Leclerc about the timing of Connect the Coast Side. Did I already say that might be January? Oh, he said that if there was some way to stop all the permit applications from coming in, then maybe they could get to these long-range projects. And it's sort of like the ones causing the, you know.
Hey, maybe we can get them to declare a building moratorium so they can catch up.
There we go.
Right. I'll hold my breath for that one, Dave.
But that just reminded me, one more thing I should have said earlier under one of these agenda items. Basically, when people talk about the Connect the Coast Side or the Comprehensive Transportation Management Plan, and, you know, as what we saw, it was mostly focused on things to do with the highway or not to do with the highway. But basically, the whole point of that Comprehensive Transportation Management Plan is required by the Coastal Commission, and a big piece of it was supposed to develop policies for lot retirement and lot merger, substandard lot merger, and all those things which would reduce build out. And that's why I'm so anxious, a lot of us have been so anxious to get this done, to start that process. Years go by, and basically there's another thing on the zoning hearing officer sometime soon, the subdivision there in Moss Beach, one parcel into 3 parcels in the right off of Carlos. It's the Bishop's, whatever.
Right across from the sheriff's substation, basically.
Yeah, basically, the way the zoning is, in your medium density area, the minimum parcel size is 5,000 square feet. And if you have a parcel that you could divide up into 3, and each of them would be at least 5,000 square feet, you can subdivide it. You don't have to retire any lots elsewhere. Currently, you can do that, and there's nothing we can say to oppose that. And these things are happening, all these things are happening all along. So, there's that. Okay.
Okay. I've got 2 things, sort of anticlimactic now that they've had the first public meeting, but the Learning Portugal Law Trail meetings have been going full bore. As you guys probably heard last night, they have a logo. We have a very solid auto route. We have a pretty good idea where the hiking route would be, what's there now, what would still have to be done in the future, what alternate routes there are in our area. They're still considering the old Caltrans bypass route as part of it. The San Pedro Mountain Road will also probably be part of it. It actually followed part of it on the far side. So huge amounts of progress. There's a good chance that a lot of the stuff will be in place for 2019. November 4th, 2019 to be more explicit, the anniversary, 200th anniversary date of the quote unquote discovery. Did I say 250? Thank you, it's 250. Of the Spanish first observation of San Francisco Bay. We're trying to avoid the use of the word discovery now.
Good.
Anyway, so that's still ongoing. Post has provided totally invaluable help on the GIS aspects of that. MidPen is involved on trails on their lands. State Parks has been very heavily involved. It's been a very cooperative effort. Did you have a question on that?
No, I just have something quick to
Okay.
announce as well.
And then the only other thing I've got is I'm, thanks to an invitation from Supervisor Horsley, I'm now on the Tunitas Creek Beach Community Advisory Committee, which is a joint effort between the county and Post. First meeting will probably be mid-October on that.
Great. Thanks for doing that, Dave.
Sure. That's all I've got. Brandon?
All right, so just one more quick thing. I contacted Ellie. Oh, she's gone.
Yeah, she's back.
All right, I contacted Ellie regarding the process regarding either renaming a street name or putting a secondary, honorary street name. And basically, her response was that I would have to talk to someone in Public Works, and I'm still working with her to find out who that person is. So that's all I have for now.
Can you say who you're talking about naming it after?
I don't know. I just got inspiration in. I went to Foster City, and the irony is that Foster City, like, there's a bunch of street names named after admirals, and I just find it funny that, you know, our street names here are pretty plain, and we have like we have Park Street, Park Avenue, and, you know, Foster City have much more inspirational, funner names. Maybe we could name a street Admiral Nimitz Street, or Admiral Dugrass Avenue, the admiral who fought in the Battle of Chesapeake Bay, who led us to independence. Chesapeake Bay allowed us to win the Battle of Yorktown, which allowed our independence. So could change one of the, or we could change one of the street names or add an honorary name to one of these plain generic names like 17th Street or whatever. You know, and it matches our, you know, nautical environment much better than Foster City, so.
Okay. Future agendas, I'm sorry, I'm assuming that's it for council activity. Closing council activity, moving on to future agendas. October 10th, as previously mentioned, no meeting, is the candidate forum. October 16th is the second candidate forum. We have no future agenda items planned, although we might have follow-up on some of our existing past letters. Does anybody have any non-future agenda items?
I wanted to give you an update. I had mentioned a possible agenda item last month that I was working on, which would have been a commemorative dedication of the Surfers Beach Stairs to a local guy who died this summer. In speaking, I spoke to Senator Hill's office and Supervisor Horsley's office. Both offices were interested and willing to help out. However, I talked to friends of the family. I have not talked to the family because the most important thing is what the family wants. And you know, maybe it's too soon. The family has not shown an interest in this particular project. They're looking at other things. They've got a GoFundMe possibly for a bench down at Pomponio where it happened, which makes sense. So I will, you know, and I'm certainly not gonna continue to contact the family. They know, they have the contact information. I tried to make sure that they knew that this wasn't a politicized thing, that this person was very important to the community, and as a parent myself, thinking something that would be nice for the family, but I could see their point of view as well. So I will continue to follow through on that, but I just want to let you know that that may not transpire.
Okay. And the only other thing I would say is we only have 3 more meetings until the end of the year. We are only having 1 meeting in October due to the forum. We only have 1 in November due to Thanksgiving. We only have 1 in December due to the holidays. The December meeting is where the new council members will be seated, as well as the returning ones. So it's actually not that much longer a year. All right.
Wow.
For ideas, you might take a look at our work plan from the retreat last January. I do update that periodically with things that have happened, and something might spark your attention. I was thinking maybe we would have something going on with Connect the Coast Side this fall, but I guess we don't need to worry about that.
Yeah. You're saving that spot for Planned Princeton, right? Sorry, Lisa. All right, Dave, you better adjourn this meeting.
All right, I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.